The judge, he seemed not to take his eyes from that dead cone where it rose off the desert like agate shanker. We followed solemn as owls, so that he turned to look back, and he did laugh one. He seen our faces. At the foot of the mountain we drew lots, and we sent 2 men to goon with the horses. I watched them go. One of them is at this fire tonight, and I saw him lead them horses away over the slag lands like a doomed man. And we were not doomed ourselves, one don't reckon. When I looked up, he was already upon Theslope, hand and foot. The judge was, his bag over his shoulder, and his rifle for Alpens. And so did we all go. Not halfway up we could already see the savages out on the plain. We climbed in. I thought at worst we'd throw ourselves into the cauldron rather than be taken by us fiends. We climbed up, and I reckon it was midday when we reached the top. We were done in. The savages not 10 miles out. I looked at the men about me, and sure they didn't look much. Dignity was gone out of them. They were good hearts all, then and now, and I did not like to see them. So, and I thought the judge had been sent among us for a curse, and yet he proved me wrong. At the time he did. I'm of 2 minds again now. He was the first to the rim of the cone for all the size of him, and he stood gazing about like he'd come for the view. Then he sat down, and he begun to scale at the rock with his knife. One by on, we straggled up, and he sat with his back to that gap and hole, and he was chipping away and heckled upon us to do the same. It was brimstone, a wheel of brimstone, all about the rim of Theckeldron, bright yellow and shining here and there, with the little flakes of silica but most pure flowers of sulfur. We chipped it loose and chopped it fine with our knives till we had a boot to a pounds of it. And then the judge took the wallets and went to a cupped place in the rock, and dumped out the charcoal and the niter, and stirred them about with his hand, and poured the sulfur in. I didn't know but what we'd be required to bleed into it like Freemasons, but it was not so. He worked it up dry with his hands, and all the while, the savages down there on the plain, drawing you to us, and when I turned back, the judge was standing, the great hairless oaf, and he took out his pizzle, and he was pissin' into the mixture, piss, with a great vengeance, and one hand aloft, and he cried out for us to do likewise. We were half mad anyways, all lined up, Delawares and all. Every man save Glanton, and who was a study. We hauled forth our members, and at it we went, and the judge on his knees, kneading mass with his naked arms, and the piss was splashing about, and he was crying out to us to piss. Man, piss for your very souls, for can't you see the redskins yonder, and laughing the while, and working up this great mass in a foul black dough. A devil's batter by the stink of it, and him not a bloody dark pastry man himself, I don't suppose, and he pulls out his knife, and he commences to roll it across the south-facing rocks, spreading it out thin with the knife blade, and watching decent with one eye, and him smeared with blacking and reeking of piss and sulfur, and grinning, and wielding the knife with a dexterity that was wondrous, like he did it every day of his life. And when he was done, he sat back and wiped his hands on his chest, and then he watched these images, and so did we all. They were on the Malpais by then, and they had a tracker who followed us every step on that nicked rock, falling back at each blind head and calling out to the others. I don't know what Heffaloud sent, perhaps. We could soon hear them token down there. Then they seen us. Well, God in His glory knows what they thought. They were scattered out across the lava, Andone of them pointed, and they all looked up, thunderstruck, no doubt, to see 11 men perched on the topmost rim of that scalded atoll like misflown birds. They parleyed and weeched to see would they dispatch any of their number after the horses, but they did not. Their greed overcame all else, and they started for the base of the cone. scrambling over the lava for to see who would be first. We had, I would suppose, an hour. We watched the savages, and we watched the judges. Fulmatrix drying on the rocks, and we watched a cloud that was making for the sun. One by one we give up watching the rocks or the savages, either one, for the cloud did look to be dead set for Thiessen, and it would have took the better part of an hour to have crossed it, and that was the last hour we had. Well, the judge was sitting, making entries in his little book, and he saw the cloud same as every other man, and he put down the book and watched it, and we did all. No one spoke. There was none to curse and none to pray. We just watched, and that cloud just cut thicker from the sun and passed on, and there was no shadow fell upon us, and the judge took up his ledger and went on with his entries as before. I watched him, then I clambered down and tested a patch of the stuff with my hand. There was heat coming off of it. I walked along the Ryman. The savages was asleep by every quarter, for there was no route to favor on that bald and gravel slope. I looked for rocks of any size to send down, but there was none there, larger than your fist, just fine gravel and plates of scrag. I looked at Glanton, and he was watching the judge, and he seemed to have had his wits stole. Well, the judge closed up his little book and took his leather shirt and spread it out in a little cupped place and called for us to bring the stuff to him. Every knife was out, and we went scraping it up, and him cautioning us not to strike fire on them flints. And we heaped it up in theshert, and he commenced to chop and grind it with his knife. And Captain Glanton, he calls out, "Captain Glanton, would you believe it? Captain Glanton," he says, "come charge that swivel bore of yours, and let's see what manner of thing we have here." Glanton come up with his rifle, and he scooped his charger full, and he charged both barrels and patched 2 balls, and drove them home, and capped the piece, and made to step to the rim. But that was MVR, the judge's way. Down the maw of that thing, he says, and Glanton never questioned it. He went down the pitch of the inner rim to where lay the terminus of that terrible flue, and he held his piece out over Eitent, pointed it straight down, and cocked the hammer, and fired. You wouldn't hear a sound like it in a long day's ride. It give me the fidgets. He fired both barrels, and he looked at us, and he looked at the judge. The judge just waved and went on with his grindin', and then he called us all about to fill our horns and flasks, and we did, one by one, circling past him like communicants. And when all had shared, he filled his own flask, and he got out his pistols and saw to the priming. The foremost of the savages was not more than a furlong in the slope. We were ready to lay into them, but again the judge would not have it. He fired off his pistols down into the cauldron, spacing out the shots, and he fired all 10 chambers, and cautioned us back from sight while he reloaded the pieces. All this gunfire had give the savages some pause, no doubt, for they very likely reckoned us to be without powder altogether. And then the judge, he steps up to the rim, and he had with him a good white linen shirt from out of his bag, and he waved it to the redskins, and he called down to them in Spanish. Well, it would have brought tears to your eyes. "All dead save me," he called. "Have mercy on me. Todos muertos." And those I'm waving the shirt, God had set them yapping on the slope like dogs and heterans to us. The judge, with that smile of his, and he says, "Gentlemen," that was all he said. He had the pistols stuck in his belt at the back, and he drew them one in each hand, and he is as sather-handed as a spider. He can write with both hands at a time, and I've seen him to do it. And he commenced to kill Indians. We needed no second invitation. God, it was a butchery. At they first fire we killed around dozen, and we did not let up. Before the last poor nigger reached the bottom of the slope, there was 58 of them lay slaughtered among the gravels. They just slide down the slope like chaff down a hopper. Some turned this way, some that, and they made a cane about the base of the mountain. We rested our rifle barrels on the brimstone, and we shot 9 more on the lava where they ran. It was a stand, what it was. Wagers was laid. The last Optum shot was a reckonable part of a mile from the muzzles of the guns, and that on a dead run. It was sharpshooting all around, and not a misfire in the batch with that queer powder. The ex turned and looked at the kid, and that was the judge, the first ever I saw him. Aye, he's a thing to study. The lad looked at Tobin. What's he a judge of? He said. What's he a judge of? What's he a judge of? Tobin glanced off across the fire. Ah, lad, he said. Hush now, the man will hear ye. He's ears like a fox. Thank you so much for watching. The fact that you stayed until the end says a lot. It means you care. You're hungry. You know deep inside that you were meant for more. And you're ready to take the steps, no matter how small, to reach it. This isn't just a video. It's a reminder, a quiet voice inside telling you, you can change, you can grow. The truth, most people won't. They'll scroll past, but not you. You're learning that small decisions, reading a page, going for a walk, saying no to distractions, saving a little money, choosing focus aren't small at all. They build your life. It won't always be easy, but it will be worth it, because every small step builds momentum, and momentum creates change. So keep going. You've already started, and that alone puts you ahead of most.